Welcome back to the live show. Good evening. It is currently 8:30 p.m. and today's date is the 7th of November 2024. How are you doing? Yes, this is the first live for today. Yes, I know. I got here late today. How are you doing? It's a wonderful day today. God is great. God is wonderful. Everything is wonderful, man. Yes, I am back. I told you we're going to be back here every single day, regardless. Okay. Every single day, man. All right. The title for today's stream is American Greatness. Shout out to Joel, my brother. How are you doing, bro? Yes. All right. Let me pull the polls up. Yes. Okay. Okay. That was not the right one. All right. The wars. Comment. Here we go. Okay, tell me, how was your day? Put it in the chat. How was your day, man? Okay, yes, y'all. All right. So, thank you for tuning in. You know what time it is. It is your boy Genesis. I am back here. And the title of the stream is American Greatness. We are about to have a good time. Okay. This might be a short live. This might be a long stream. I don't know. Okay. It depends on the level of vibration we end up on. Okay. All right, one thing is for sure. The 47th is Donald J. Trump, and reports has been that he has spoken to 70 world leaders. That's what the report is. The report is 70 world leaders have spoken with the OG. Hmm. Now, does that include Russia? Does that include Iraq? Does that include Iran? Does that include Israel? Definitely Israel, because Israel's prime minister congratulated the president elect. Does that include Ukraine? Does that include everybody? But the report is he has spoken with 70 world leaders. Also, the stock market has gone all the way up. BTC has gone all the way up. The whole thing has gone all the way up. Okay. This is just like 48 hours after he was announced as the president elect. Okay. How do you feel? This is why I titled the stream American Greatness. Greatness is about to happen right now. Okay. This is what a leader does. This is what a leader does. A leader works harder than the people that puts him there because you are here to serve, and he's showing it just 48 hours after he's named the president elect. Let's see what Fox is talking about when it comes to Kamala concession speech.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. Now I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
So meanwhile, the Democratic blame game is in full swing, some of it public, some behind closed doors, some surrogates pointing the finger after the vice president's crushing loss.
It was basically, if anyone has seen Game of Thrones, it was a red wedding. It was a bloodbath. So everyone is in a state of shock.
You did say in an interview last night that you thought that Tim Walz was part of the problem.
I do. Well, I'm biased. I'm from Pennsylvania. I think it's one of several factors. I think there were several factors that led to this result, but I think definitely contributed to this.
Peter Doocy now reports from the White House, leading our coverage today. Got some questions for you in a moment. Peter, good morning. First of all to you, what do you have?
Good morning, Bill. The revered Democratic campaign consultant David Plouffe, who was brought in to Wilmington to try to help Harris seal the deal when she took over for Joe Biden, has deleted his account on X after appearing to blame Joe Biden for Harris's loss on Tuesday and for setting the vice president up to fail. Part of what he wrote is, "We dug out of a deep hole, but not enough. A devastating loss. Thanks for being in the arena, all of you." The sentiment with that and everything else around here from Harris loyalists has shifted from Joe Biden's legacy as a selfless patriot is cemented because he stepped aside to let Harris beat Trump, to Joe Biden was so unpopular his VP was doomed from the get-go. That is according to a report in Politico with this. "We ran the best campaign we could, considering Joe Biden was president," grumbled one Harris aide granted anonymity to speak freely. "Joe Biden is the singular reason Kamala Harris and Democrats lost tonight." Exit polls don't reflect that Joe Biden was the singular reason that Harris lost. And some Democrats who did win this week are imploring their colleagues to drop the bitterness quickly or else.
One thing I don't think is constructive is to get into the blame game, blaming certain individuals for things that could have been done or should have been done or would have been done. None of that will help us rebuild for 2026 and 2028.
Kamala Harris can't just go off the grid because she is still the vice president for another 3 months. Her office today, though, is telling us she's going to have internal meetings and briefings with staff that are all closed press. So we do not expect to see her in the Rose Garden with President Biden in 2 hours, where he will explain what comes next with the transfer of power, and also hopefully a little bit more about this invitation that he extended to Donald Trump to come here to the White House at some point, just to scope out how things might have changed in the 4 years since he moved out.
Peter, the readout you gave all of us on that phone call yesterday was pretty interesting. Magnanimous, I would even suggest, between the two men. Do you have anything more as to when Trump arrives there, when this might happen? And do you know the last time that Harris and Biden had a conversation?
The vice president and the president did talk on the phone at some point yesterday before she conceded. We don't know exactly what it was about, and we know that the Biden-Trump meeting is being ironed out. The date is being ironed out with their two staffs, but it's going to be really interesting to hear how President Biden threads the needle today about what comes next with this peaceful transfer of power, because that's not going to happen until January, and it's not like Joe Biden is just going to stop trying to implement his agenda. You've got Jen O'Malley Dillon from the campaign that just lost talking about how the work is about to begin to Trump-proof the administration. Joe Biden next week is going to head to South America. He's going to try to put his fingerprints on as many different things as possible before a president with a completely different worldview comes in and tries to undo it.
And I think it's important, Peter, so that people understand that just doesn't happen at the White House. That is a directive that goes out to all of the cabinet agencies. So and we don't have enough reporters to cover all of that, but a lot of that to come. And many of those people also that work in the White House now are worried about their futures, looking for jobs.
Absolutely.
Peter Doocy, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I want to bring in Josh Holmes right now, host of the Ruthless podcast. And Josh, good morning to you. You know, it's times like these where you can't read long or deep enough. And there's so many pieces out there already starting to take shape. Holman Jenkins writes this in the Wall Street Journal. Just going to read a line or two. Working Americans, when they voted for Democrats, were the backbone of America. Saints of small-town virtue. When they didn't, they were garbage and deplorables. Now, Holman Jenkins, he captured like the Trump move in 2016, early 2017, helped us understand a little bit. I mean, that line nails it again.
Really, really well said, and I think reflective of a whole bunch of people across this country who have felt totally overlooked by the Democratic Party, by the Biden administration, by Kamala Harris, and seeing somebody in President Trump that represented them and gave them a voice. And it happened in 2016. It happened again in 2024. And I think in addition to that, there are new coalitions that we're talking about, right? It's not just your sort of white working class that everybody talked about in 2016. You're talking about huge numbers of Hispanic voters. You're talking about big increases in African American support of President Trump. Young people, Bill, I mean, it's an old maxim in American politics that Democrats have a codlock on 18 to 25. President Trump just won 18 to 25 across this country. That is really a wild coalition.
And Bernie Sanders tweeted this yesterday. He said, it should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. And I think it's interesting because some Democrats might sit there and think, wow, maybe we should have gone with Bernie. But I don't think that working class people were saying we want the Bernie Sanders way of the world. They want a different way. They want opportunity. They don't want socialism.
Yeah, that's entirely right. Look, it has been clear for 4 long years that the American people do not like a progressive left way of governance. I mean, that's what the Biden administration implemented in their very first year. Every exit poll, even in the midterms where Republicans didn't fare as well, people said on the economy, yeah, we blamed Joe Biden. On immigration, yeah, we blamed Joe Biden. Now, ultimately, they didn't turn around and vote Republican, but they didn't love anything that this administration was doing from a policy perspective. But what Bernie Sanders and I think others are talking about is this condescending tone that Democrats use that it basically tells working class people around this country, like, don't worry, we know better for you. You can't think about these big things. We're here to help. And that has just been wholesale rejected in the biggest possible way on Tuesday.
Yeah, Jen O'Malley Dillon, we talked about this yesterday afternoon, this memo that came out. Letitia James, the NYAG here, pretty strong in her language yesterday. She says in part, O'Malley Dillon says, number 3, guys, the work of protecting America from the impacts of a Trump presidency starts now. To some people, I think maybe that sounds like Resistance 2.0, perhaps. If you were flipping around the channels yesterday, you heard a lot of talk about racism and misogyny, talking about fear and anger won. What do I tell my daughter now? But as the morning rolled on, you heard more things like, why did Democrats embrace anti-Semitism? I mean, that was the way it was framed in this whole Gaza battle here. And why didn't they do anything about immigration or inflation? So some of them were starting to look at themselves and blame themselves. But I thought this comment was the most relevant. The progressive movement needs to end if we want to win again. Now, what do you think about that, Josh, in the examination postmortem?
Well, it's the underpinning of the modern Democratic Party is this sort of identity-based pitch to the American people that, you know, somehow you can't think for yourself and your destiny is entirely predetermined based on what it is that you look like. And so you saw an immediate reaction to how could this happen? Well, maybe Hispanic voters are racist. Maybe black men are sexist. I mean, this is really what they were saying. And it underscores they're not going to learn the right lessons out of this bill. No. Like, if that's where they're headed, it's going to be a real problem for them. I think if you look inward, look, the American people just told you that they wanted a mandate for President Trump to fix this economy, fix these borders, and maintain some order around the world. It would be a very good idea for the Democratic Party to go about the work of trying to help him fix all of that. Yeah. If they're going to do Resistance 2.0, they're going to find a really angry American public.
Claire Lehman of Quillette wrote a piece called Revenge of the Silent Male Voter, and based on her observations, that's worth looking at as well. And David Brooks, I think, is trying to finally say, guys, maybe we have a problem of our own. My last question to you is about the Senate and Senator Mitch McConnell. His last act is delivering a Republican majority with some great candidates that they recruited in order to run. I was surprised that Wisconsin went for Trump, but returned Tammy Baldwin to the Senate. On the Democratic side, Eric Hobbs ran a good race there. But what does it mean for President Trump that he will have this Republican majority going forward? I mean, he might be able to get a lot done.
Yeah, absolutely critical, right? It starts with all of your personnel. I mean, if they want to confirm cabinet secretaries, you better darn well be sure that you have a United States Senate. It was Mitch McConnell's lasting goal to try to ensure that he turned over a Republican majority to his successor. I think he raised somewhere north of $400 million and had a great partnership with Steve Daines over at the NRSC to recruit candidates who could compete and win this cycle. They didn't get everything on the map, but it's darn tough to beat a Senate Democratic incumbent, any incumbent in the Senate. And they went around, and I mean, the Pennsylvania in and of itself, that win in Ohio, very big win, could well pick up another one in Nevada, and obviously they have the one in West Virginia. They're going to have a majority here, and it's going to make life a lot easier for President Trump when he takes office.
Josh Holmes.
America is about to experience the highest level of greatness. And according to reports, he has spoken with 70 world leaders. Think about it. 70 world leaders. I mean, to have the Senate, to have the White House, he's going to get a lot done. A lot done. All right, so still the president, Joe Biden actually addressed the nation. Let's hear what he has to say.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Please. Thank you. Good to see this cabinet and the staff together here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's good to see you all. Particularly good to see my granddaughter sitting in the front row here. Hi, Finn. How are you, honey? For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. Yesterday, I also spoke with Vice President Harris. She's been a partner and a public servant. She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran. You know, the struggle for the soul of America, since our very founding, has always been an ongoing debate and still vital today. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do, no matter who you voted for, is see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Bring down the temperature. I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent. And it can be trusted. win or lose. I also hope we can restore the respect for all our election workers who busted their necks and took risks at the outset. We should thank them. Thank them for staffing voting sites, counting the votes, protecting the very integrity of the election. Many of them are volunteers who do it simply out of love for their country. And as they did their duty as citizens, I will do my duty as president. I'll fulfill my oath, and I will honor the Constitution. On January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America. To all our incredible staff, supporters, cabinet members, all the people who've been hanging out with me for the last 4 years, God love you, as my mother would say. Thank you so much. You put so much into the past 4 years. I know it's a difficult time. You're hurting. I hear you and I see you. But don't forget all that we accomplished. It's been a historic presidency. Not because I'm president, because what we've done, what you've done. A presidency for all Americans. Much of the work we've done is already being felt by the American people, but the vast majority of it will not be felt over the next 10 years. We have legislation we passed that's just only now just really kicking in. We're going to see over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure work done, changing people's lives in rural communities and communities that are in real difficulty because it takes time to get it done. And so much more. It's going to take time, but it's there. The road ahead is clear, assuming we sustain it. There's so much we can get done and will get done based on the way the legislation was passed. And it's truly historic. You know, we're leaving behind the strongest economy in the world. I know people are still hurting, but things are changing rapidly. Together, we've changed America for the better. Now we have 74 days to finish the term, our term. Let's make every day count. That's the responsibility we have to the American people. Look, folks, you all know it in your lives. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is...
Thank you for tuning in to the live show. You know what time it is. Double tap your screen to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Did I just hear him say we are leaving behind the strongest economy in history? Man, bro. Just Trump being president-elect, within 10 hours, the stock market was all the way up. For the past 2 years, it has never been that high. BTC broke the highest record in 10 hours, bro. Just Trump being president-elect. And Brother Joe, want to say he's living the greatest economy ever. Don't you dare take credit for that now. Don't do it. Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, man.
Is unforgivable. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. We all get knocked down. But the measure of our character, as my dad would say, is how quickly we get back up. Remember, a defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay, but we need to stay engaged. We need to keep going. And above all, we need to keep the faith. I'm so proud to have worked with all of you. I really mean it. I sincerely mean it. God bless you all. God bless America. And may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh my goodness. What is going on? What is going on right there? Okay, so as you all know, the president-elect is Donald J. Trump, and now the blame game begins. Blame game begins. Everybody's trying to say, why did Kamala lose? This is why she lost. This is that. This is blah, blah, blah. When just 3 days ago, they're saying there's no way Donald Trump will be the 47th. But now it's like, we know why she lost. Anyway, let's see what CNN's talking about based on why she lost, especially Van Jones.
All right, everyone's here with me. Lulu Garcia-Navarro, can I start with you? I know you just spoke to the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for your podcast, breaking her silence on what happened here. She was, of course, instrumental in pushing Biden to step aside, right? I mean, let's just be clear about that. So what's she saying now?
Well, without giving too much away, she talked about the fact that this was a heartbreaking loss. She used that word. She also said that she has spoken to the vice president and that it was a very emotional conversation, that they're friends, and that conversation was difficult for both of them. We had a very wide-ranging and lengthy conversation about what happened, how she sees the path forward, and what her own plans are. And, you know, that will come out soon. But, you know, it is honestly a very, very difficult moment for the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Absolutely. Van, so Nancy Pelosi using the word heartbreaking in her conversation with Lulu. Carville talking about a dark tunnel. Blame is starting.
Yep.
And there needs to be discussion among Democrats. So,
well, look, we spent $1 billion and elected Donald Trump. That's not a blame game. That's called accountability. And the people at the top of the campaign, the top of the party, have a lot of people pissed off at him because there were people who had suggestions. There were people who were saying, why are we doing this? Why this? It was like, hey, we've got it. We've got this special magical computer formulation. We've tested every ad. Shut up and sit down and go back to work. And so people said, okay, well, I guess you're right. And then we got clobbered, clocked, knocked down, beat up, drugged down. And so people are mad, and they should be mad. And the people at the top are going to have to listen. There is a grassroots rebellion happening in this party, and it's coming to knock on the door of the people who are in charge of the party. That's not blame game. That's accountability.
Accountability. I mean, and, you know, I know you're for $1 billion.
$1 billion.
And I believe they technically, blew a few $100 million of that in the recent weeks, Andrew Yang, and now ended up technically maybe in debt a little bit. They did door knocking. They did traditional ads. But you heard what Van's saying. They weren't listening to other ideas that people maybe like Van had.
For instance.
Yes,
For instance.
well, I mean, there should be accountability, and Joe Biden should not have run for a second term. There should have been a competitive primary in January. He should have dropped out in January and not July. And by the way, J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, they should have challenged him in January. We all know that they had campaigns in waiting, but instead everyone said, oh, Joe's going to be fine. Joe's going to be fine. He has a disastrous debate against Donald Trump, and then he drops out in July, and then everything is under the gun and in hurry up mode. The party lost a crucial period where they could have introduced the next generation of leaders to the American people, vetted and chosen a ticket that could have taken the fight to Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden fumbling the ball to Kamala down the stretch.
And Lulu, to this whole conversation, is there any sense from people you're talking to of what role they think it played? That there was a perception, certainly among some voters, that at least Kamala Harris had not been honest with voters about Joe Biden's true state. I mean, this kept coming up again and again. Now people are trying to figure out, well, what happened? Is that something you hear?
I mean, I think that one of the things that happened during this election is that when that disastrous debate with Joe Biden happened, I think there was a break in trust with the Democratic Party and the electorate. There was a feeling that there wasn't actually honesty about the condition of the president, and that people had been perhaps shielding him from the voters. I mean, if you think about the fact that he really hadn't been sitting down for interviews, he hadn't been giving extended press conferences. And so I think that there is a real, there are still questions about what exactly happened there and who knew what and when they knew it.
Right. I mean, that is the real question. I mean, Van, I'd done an interview with him a few weeks before that. I didn't know, he was fine in that capacity, but you would imagine someone around him all the time, as many were, would have had a much different, perhaps, view. But, it all came down to many, many things, right? But when you look at the actual votes, it wasn't as if Trump suddenly surged in so many things.
Yes.
It's that Democrats did worse. Monmouth went through just the blue states. Trump got an extra 280,000 votes this time versus last time, so he improved. But that is not the story. Look at this full screen.
Yeah.
Harris lost 3,339,404 votes.
Yes.
That's what stands out there.
Well, Bakari Sellers said over and over again, it's either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or the couch. And Bakari was always worried about the couch, people just not feeling inspired enough to go out and vote. He wasn't worried that people were going to not vote for Kamala and go vote for Trump. He was afraid they weren't going to vote at all. And here's how we got beat. We got beat because the Republicans and the conservatives built a different media system that had to do with online, had to do with podcasts, had to do with streaming platforms, and they were spending their money there. We were laughing at them and knocking on doors in Philadelphia and Detroit. It was like, there's no Trump people. They're not dropping literature. They're not knocking on doors.
In fact, it was laughing like, oh, Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk with their PACs don't know what they're doing.
We were making fun of Donald Trump for having thrown away his ground game and doing some weird stuff online. We thought that they were idiots. It turned out we were the idiots. We woke up in a body bag because while we were knocking on doors, they were making these phones into 24-hour-a-day political weapons for themselves. And so we got outflanked, outplayed, outbeat by people who told us the whole time that they knew what they were doing. And people are mad. And Future Forward, all these different groups that vacuumed up all this money and told everybody to sit down and shut up are going to be in for an accountability session from the grassroots, and it is coming.
I remember when you and I were speaking at one point earlier, you were talking about algorithms, all kinds of data that was available that you were, people were going to be presenting to the Harris campaign.
Sure.
And I suppose you're going to say that did fall on deaf ears to large part?
Yeah, Van's right. They were like, we've got it.
We've got it.
And they didn't have it. And one very obvious missed opportunity is that Joe Rogan has the biggest audience in the country. It's disaffected, low propensity men, kind of the audience that the Harris campaign should be trying to reach. It was much more upside than anything else. Kamala goes on, Tim Walz goes on, and then you have millions of men who are exposed to the Democratic message, and they turned it down because she was too busy. I mean, like it makes zero sense, except in the context that the team just didn't have confidence in her to do it, which would be its own issue.
Unless you think he's being mean. 48 million views for the Rogan-Trump interview on YouTube alone.
Which was what, a 3-hour interview?
A 3-hour interview with 48 million views. Like, they were laughing.
That's 2/3 of the total number of votes that Harris.
Yeah, so
it's more than the debate, I think. It's like 1 million
Can I
watched the
jump
debate.
in here?
Yeah, Lulu.
I'm very happy that everyone's talking here about the information ecosystem. Obviously, it's incredibly important. So is Joe Rogan. But there's two issues here. One is the message, and the other is the messenger. And so, and how those messages are delivered. And so, there is a lot of discussion right now about the ground game and how you reach voters and all these things. And I think that's going to be parsed. But, voters told the Democratic Party over and over and over again that their main issues were their pocketbooks, inflation, and immigration. And that was what they told them. And the closing message of the Democratic Party was democracy and Donald Trump is a bad man.
Right. Well, but
By
is
the
there
way,
any
those
way
democracy-
that they could have won, though, with Kamala Harris with immigration on the issue, given that she was part of the Biden administration? That was just never really defined.
Yeah, so two things. Number one, if you were going to run Kamala, then she needs permission to break from Joe Biden and say, hey, look, whatever the administration did, I would have done things differently, and we're going to go this other direction. I mean, her inability to do that was a very serious problem.
I don't know if it was winnable. There are two numbers. One is 39, the other is 75. 39 is the approval rate for Joe Biden. That's very low.
Yep.
And 75 is the wrong track measure. That's very high. So she had a tough hill to climb. I think that she did as well as you could possibly do, but she had a bunch of people running that campaign who did not listen, who were very arrogant, who sucked up $1 billion, who pissed off a lot of people, and you're going to be hearing about it for a long time.
A lot of people who had said they weren't going to donate another dollar if Biden didn't get out in July, and then they opened up the floodgates and they did give that money.
January, not July. You know, Joe Biden, you know, I endorsed him in 2020, but he failed the George Washington test in passing the torch in time to have a real primary.
All right, all of you, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always.
Well, I am glad that they are accepting the results and everybody's licking their wounds and everybody's like, okay, we have to learn from DOG, the legend, the 45th, now the 47th. We just have to learn. And this is the thing. We were talking here during the summertime, late summertime, early fall. We were like, why is Kamala not doing interviews? And I said here, and you can ask the mods in the chat, the moderators. We used to say, she's not doing interviews. How is she going to talk to the American public? The people want to know what you're going to do. She didn't do interviews for like the first 40 days. Like the first 40 days, she never did interviews. So it's like, of course you were going to lose. Of course. Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, man. Let's listen to what the voters in Pennsylvania spoke about and how they accepted the results on CNN.
I hear directly from voters about the choices they made in the election. CNN's Danny Freeman has been talking to people in Battleground, Pennsylvania.
It was just a great feeling. I still have goosebumps.
It was like Christmas came early for Bernie Schiffler at Park Hill Jewelry in Ephrata, Pennsylvania.
Look at that shine.
The Republican small business owner, sporting Trump shoes and a custom Trump ring he made himself, said he feels like finally the country is back on the right track.
What did it mean to you to vote for him a third time? It was just great. I thought, he did so well in 2016. I just wanted to see him do this again.
In the small red borough in the larger red Lancaster County, supporters of former President Trump echoed what his fans elsewhere felt around the country.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm feeling relieved that America came together and saved our democracy.
Gabby James says she's a Republican, but she's also pro-choice.
I know the main concern here is women's rights, but strong women are going to always rally together and fight for our rights, and we need to vote and come together to make the right decision in the states. Unfortunately, it has come to that, but that was not my deciding factor in voting for Donald Trump.
Are you concerned that President-elect Trump will be hostile to women's rights at all?
No. I think as a nation, women are going to come together and prove ourselves.
In nearby Lancaster, a bluer city in the red county, Democrat Sarah Thomas said she couldn't believe in the end it really wasn't close.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm pretty disappointed. I'm just sad. I'm worried. I just woke up feeling kind of disgusted and ashamed, honestly.
The mother, who works with children, said for her this was about reproductive rights and about rhetoric.
I want to raise my son to be someone who believes that men and women have equal dignity and autonomy over their bodies. I do not believe in the, frankly, xenophobic and racist hate that's been spewed.
Democrat Greg Colton was still at a loss for words.
I had really hoped that we would have something other than a caricature of a president for the next 4 years.
The Pennsylvanian worried the discourse in American politics will only get worse.
I wanted to put someone in office who would embody the ideals and the integrity of the American people, and I don't think we have that now.
With the voters having delivered their judgment, now the focus turns to what happens next under a new president.
I'm hoping for secure borders. I'm hoping for economic change. I'm hoping that enough women come out and demonstrate the need for women's rights and hope for a better place that we have been in for the past 4 years.
Now, Anderson, here in Lancaster County, Democrats told me that they were really hoping to close the margins in this traditionally red county. That was something that we were looking at yesterday as polls were closing. Governor Shapiro got about 48% of the vote here back in 2022, but in the end, Vice President Harris actually paced with President Biden back in 2020, only getting about 41% of the vote. Trump, though, improved his margins here, and that was, of course, the story of many, many places across the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Anderson?
Danny Friedman, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Back with the team here in New York. Let's talk about the Democratic Party and what needs to happen, what needs to be looked at and analyzed.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of important discussions were going on there earlier, and I guess I call myself a dingle Democrat at this moment. And I started talking about this last night. I think this wasn't just a problem in this election. This has been a growing problem over time. This disaffection among working class voters with the Democratic Party and the kind of growth of the Democratic Party as a college-educated metropolitan party that approaches working class voters in a kind of missionary way, saying we're going to help you become more like us, and kind of disdains, not intentionally, but sends these signals that really bespeak a lack of respect. And I think the party in some ways has lost its ability to talk to working class voters. And you can see it, and it's not just white working class voters, it's black working class voters, it's Hispanic working class voters, and the party paid a price. Now, I think Kamala Harris articulated she spoke to some of the concerns of folks, but you can't develop those relationships in 90 days. The second conversation that happened had to do with Biden, and I just want to point out that...
Yeah, there was a quote in earlier from an unnamed person, a longtime aide to President Biden, saying twice our party leaders in 2016, 2024 pushed aside Biden for someone who would generate more enthusiasm. Twice we lost. Biden remains the only candidate who's beaten Trump, and he was tossed over once again.
Look, so in the exit polls...
Signed Joe Biden.
In the exit polls yesterday, Joe Biden had a 40% favorable approval rating. Nobody would get reelected with that number, but more importantly, Kamala Harris, among the 59 who disapproved of him, she lost 82-16. The whole campaign that was run against her linked her to Joe Biden. And the reason that people had concerns about Biden weren't so much this, but I mean, I raised concerns a year and a half ago and had nothing to do with Barack Obama. It had everything to do with age. I said then my concern wasn't political; it was actuarial. Yeah. And how do you tell people that you should elect someone who's going to be closer
It is
to 90
remarkable,
than
and
80?
at some point, I don't know if there will be a reckoning or some sort of, but...
I have a lot to say.
Yeah, okay, Van, go ahead.
I mean, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No, please, go ahead.
No, big picture, in 2016, these two parties had flaws, and they were about hypocrisy. You had the Republican Party, which is the party of Lincoln, the party of radical individual liberty, that had somehow smuggled in a bunch of white nationalists. And you're like, hold on a second, that doesn't make sense. Is that going to blow up the Republican Party? At the same time, you have the Democratic Party, the party of FDR and working class people, that has smuggled in all this elitism, where if you weren't eating kale, you weren't allowed in the door. I said, hold on a second, that's not going to work. I actually wrote a book about this. Like, both of these parties had fundamental hypocrisies. And the question was the racism in the party of Lincoln going to blow up that party, or was the elitism in the party of FDR going to blow up our party? Well, guess what? Our party just blew up. It blew up because of the elitism. But it's not just the elitism that's obvious. The condescension, the smarty pants stuff, the changing, what you got to call people every 6 months. Somebody called me a BIPOC. What is it? I've never gone to a BIPOC church or had a BIPOC food. I mean, they just make up stuff.
I don't even know what that means.
That's what I'm saying. Like they literally make up stuff every 6 months to make sure that you feel like an idiot. But that's not the worst of it. It's much more insidious. We thought in Philadelphia, we're doing door knocking, people going around. There's no ground game for Trump. We're laughing at Trump. Like, there's no ground game. There's nobody walking around with literature. Nobody's knocking on doors. Didn't have to, because they were on this thing. They were.
What is that?
This turns out to be a smartphone that makes you dumber the more you look at it. But it turns out that the working class is getting its information completely differently on channels that we don't know anything about, on streaming platforms that we're not at, on gaming services.
Right.
And the Trump campaign was putting information, ads. We woke up in a body bag and didn't know it because we thought we did something on 60 Minutes and here on CNN it turns out that the elitism had gotten so bad that we didn't even understand where the working class was. And that is much deeper a problem than I think we recognize.
Let me eat my crow before I let David Urban speak.
Van Jones is talking about us, okay? He's talking about the internet. We are on here and we are giving out the facts, okay? We listen to both parties. I wasn't just playing Trump. I was playing Kamala as well. And the people were like, you know what? I don't think I'll be voting for her. And that's what happened.
So I always thought Trump could win. I did not think he would win by these margins. And I misread the room on a number of things. I always kind of focused on suburban women. And what I think the Democrats so heavily focused on was abortion, abortion, abortion. This is going to be the animating issue. It was in the 2022 midterms. It turns out that it sounds like a lot of these states are kind of okay with what Trump said, which is let the states deal with it, including the fact that most of the battlegrounds, other than Georgia, was the only one that had a particularly restrictive law. People separated the vote. They were able to separate the candidate from the issue. That didn't end up being the focus. Something that I did hear from, and I think could have been motivating, is these protests on college campuses. Women in the suburbs are horrified when they see Jewish kids getting bullied and getting intimidated by these protesters who are then defended by elitist academics who are supposed to be the people rearing them up and looking out for them. That scares people. That feels like a shift that goes so far out of the mainstream of where the country wants to be. And I think that's one of the areas that the room was just misread by Democrats.
Well, 2 quick points, and not to pile on the Democrats, but I will. An issue that Axe has talked about before. Joe Biden didn't get out of this race because he said Kamala Harris can't win. I'm the only one that can win. So, there's a little bit of this, built-in delay in getting out because the only possible alternative, Kamala Harris can't win. So she was, not to put her, in a good light, but she was kind of starting out in a bad spot to begin with because the premise was you're not going to win. Right. And then the second point is a little bit more kind of on the ground. Van's talking about knocking doors. There's an article in the local Philly news about the Democratic chairman, Bob Brady of the party, Democratic Party. And Bob says, I'd like to see the Harris campaign, especially the national campaign, coordinate with us a bit on the ground. Talk to us. Give us some resources. Show us some respect. That didn't happen. They were just elitists. They went out there, they did their own thing. They didn't include the Democratic City Committee or ward leaders. They just didn't do it at all.
Yeah. Can I just make one point? Can bring about needed change from the exit poll. 28% of people, this is the most important thing. Trump won that 74-24. And this has to do with a lot of.
Van Jones may be converting to the Republican Party at this point because he's like, told y'all so. Told you. Double tap your screen right now and subscribe to the channel. You know what time it is. Okay, so what is wokeness? I want to know. Put it in the chat if you know what the meaning of wokeness is. The 5 talks about wokeness. Let's listen.
Kamala Harris's bruising loss has got some Democrats wondering if it's time to give up on wokeness. New York Democrat Richie Torres is telling his party, quote, Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like defund the police or from the river to the sea or Latinx. And he elaborated more on CNN.
I have a concern that the far left is pressuring the party to take policy positions that are deeply unpopular among most Americans. One example is defund the police. If you're speaking to working class people of color, then you would realize that there was never a mass constituency for a movement like defund the police. And so we should be taking positions that are in line with the majority of Americans.
Even the folks over at Morning Joe may think it's time for Democrats to break up with the far left.
Seeing ad after ad after ad in NFL football games saying that taxpayers were going to be funding transgender surgeries for inmates, it's not something that's going to play well in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, among men. They were afraid to respond to it because it might offend some small subset of their base.
You know who's been missing from all this conversation, Harold? Where's Ron Klain, the former chief of staff to Joe Biden? Because he was one of the people who really catered to the far left early on Green New Deal stuff, on all of these things, because he wanted their votes for some of the legislation. And now he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah, you know, I listened to my friend Joe Scarborough. I think he's right. I think that Bernie Sanders said some things early that I don't necessarily agree with. Senator Sanders said that Democrats should not be surprised that working class people have abandoned them. And he went down a list and enumerated some of the things that he believes in, and he's entitled to those beliefs. But I have a counter argument. I think working class people are capitalist. Working class people don't want to be overtaxed. Working class people don't want to be lorded over and dictated to by rich people, big corporations, or politicians who are sanctimonious. And if we're going to find our way back to that group, I was in Virginia this morning near Hot Springs, Virginia, coming back to the airport in Charlottesville and was driving. The number of Trump van signs I saw in these neighborhoods that 25, 30 years ago would have had Democratic yard signs. It just reminded me of the real answer over the last several years to this political education that Democrats and even Republicans, whose party has been changed and transformed over the last several years, the political education's name is Donald Trump. And I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, but I'm just trying to understand politics here. And I would caution my party, stop telling Democrats in the country that democracy is dead. Mm-hmm. Stop telling people that he's Hitler and that we somehow or another are going to find our way off a deep, deep cliff. We are the United States of America. And as a political party, if we want back in, we can't get ourselves back in by trying to ice ourselves and shut ourselves out. Working class Americans found a voice this election. It's not indefinite or infinite that this voice of Donald Trump's will be there, or for that matter, what he's espousing. But right now it is. And for us to learn from it, we have to learn from it and not get so constipated in the head and diarrhea with the mouth about how bad he is and how bad this moment is. Let's do a little introspection here and figure out what we can do to help working class capitalists capitalize on being Americans again.
And take your probiotics, too. All right. Hey, Judge, one of the things that they did is they were just so hyper-focused on wealthier liberal issues like student loan debt forgiveness.
Yeah.
That really made the working class mad.
And it made you mad, too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's all of us, you know. Let's make the working man who made a decision not to go to college or is still paying for his F-150, let's make him pay for the loans of people who are lawyers and doctors. Yeah. Look, the Democrats did this to themselves. And, you know, Richie Torres is so right in taking them down. You know, Bernie Sanders is right. They did abandon the working class because what they told the working class was, and this is why the blue cities went right with Donald Trump. They said, we're going to defund the police. The police are Hitler, too. And then all of a sudden, the blue cities are inundated with crime. Nobody has the ability to protect the minority community. And it was the left that said, hey, let's open the borders. And then the people living in the inner cities were suffering. Their kids were taken out of school so that the immigrants could be in the schools or be in the playgrounds. It was the Democrats who said to young girls in America, forget your dreams. We're going to put men in women's sports. And you know what I asked my producer and I, Roman, we were sitting there trying to figure out, why would the Democrat Party do this to young girls? And it was like 1.1% of the population is transgender. And of that number, less than 100 are in the NCAA. And yet what they wanted to do was destroy every young girl's dreams because we got to champion the transgenders. Let them have their own game in their own lane. So when you take the side of people who need the government, and my final example, kids who went to college. The youth vote was with Donald Trump. You know why? Because their parents work hard to put them in school. And they believe in America. And they didn't want to hear that they were oppressors or, you know, white supremacists or that they were colonizers. They wanted to raise the American flag. The Democrat Party created it, and they deserve it.
And they put so much more effort into talking about the electric vehicle tax credit than like the child tax credit. And now you see them basically having to scramble in California to try to deal with an energy crisis.
Yeah, well, Janine's right. I think they panicked after Floyd. And when Democrats get nervous, they just start appeasing. They just start giving people things. They're like, okay, you guys are upset. Here's billions of dollars to BLM. What else you want? DEI jobs. Here's some jobs. Oh, you guys hate police? Yeah, we hate police too. And they started kneeling. They literally submitted to the far left. And then it bubbled up to corporate America, bubbled up to sports, and it took over the country. And Asians were like, wait a second, we kind of like merit. And the Hispanics were like, what's Latinx? And all the working class white guys were like, we just want to wear a sombrero on Halloween. Can you guys leave us alone with the pronouns? And then Biden, he should have been the one, because he's the old white guy, to shut it down, but he didn't know what he was doing. Remember, they were just passing him things to sign about equity. He proclaimed Transgender Day on Easter Sunday. Fool. Yeah. So Kamala, California girl, doesn't know how to handle any of this stuff. She was like, that's how she got ahead in life. And then Bernie made a point, and I would disagree a little bit about that.
And this is what happens when you forget your people, when you forget the normal, common, regular, everyday American who goes to work 9 to 5, who struggles to pay the electricity bills, who struggles to buy gas, who struggles to buy groceries. This is what you get. You forget. That's why you have Hollywood rich folks campaigning for you. Those people don't even know how much egg cost. Those people don't know how much milk cost. Those people don't know what the mortgage rate is. They don't know because they are rich. Okay? We pay electricity bills, and we're looking at our electricity bills like, oh shoot, it was $120 6 months ago. Now it's $210. It's like, what happened? That's the case. You need to think about your people. Take care of your people. When a president who was running, I'm talking about back in the day when he was running before 2 days ago, he used to say, he has always said, America first. You think we're not going to vote for America first? Okay, it looks like the legendary, the 47th, has chosen his chief of staff. And it looks like Susie Wiles is going to be Trump's new White House chief of staff. According to CNN, let's see what they had to say about her.
Is it?
We're following the breaking news. President-elect Donald Trump tapping his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, as his incoming White House chief of staff. It's Trump's first major staffing announcement as longtime allies jostle for the most coveted jobs. Brian Todd is joining us right now. Brian, it looks like Trump is prioritizing loyalty as he starts building his team.
He is prioritizing that, Wolf, as he always has. And his first major choice for a position, one of the most crucial jobs in any administration, is reflective of that.
I love loyalty.
Donald Trump's first pick for his new administration is a testament to his value of true loyalty.
Susie likes to stay in the background. She's not in the background.
Susie Wiles, Trump's co-campaign manager for 2024, who's just been named White House chief of staff, is called, quote, tough, smart, and innovative by her boss, and has been praised for running an efficient campaign.
You want somebody, ideally, who knows you, who understands you, who can give you good advice, but who can also implement well, who can carry out directions. And she seems to be that type of person.
A source says Wiles told Trump she would only take the job if she could have more control over who could reach him in the Oval Office.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
As for the public face of the Trump administration, Caroline Leavitt, who was Trump's campaign spokeswoman, is said to be in strong consideration for the significant job of White House press secretary. For the position of Attorney General, one of the most sensitive, important jobs in any administration, and one that Trump might use to go after his enemies, a name being floated is Ken Paxton, Texas's Attorney General.
I'd like to open a betting pool as to how many days, not weeks, months, or years, it will take for Ken Paxton to start doing very controversial things that even Trump won't like.
Like Trump, Paxton has been both indicted and impeached. Paxton was acquitted by the Texas State Senate for alleged retribution against whistleblowers, interference in federal investigations, and inappropriate favors done for donors. For Secretary of State, a key national security position, Trump's reportedly thinking of Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who's hawkish toward China and was a finalist to be Trump's running mate.
I think most people think that would be a responsible choice. It would be somebody who does know international relations, who has been around these issues now ever since he got into the Senate.
But what to do with Robert Kennedy Jr.? Trump's promised him a top public health position. But Trump advisors tell CNN Kennedy's already caused headaches for the Trump team, like an interview he did with MSNBC just hours after Trump's victory speech.
There are entire departments, like the nutrition departments at FDA, that have to go.
RFK Jr., if he has the president's ear, could put in place anti-vaxxers, anti-fluoride people above scientists.
Meanwhile, regarding billionaire Elon Musk, who might lead a team in the Trump administration that's dedicated to cutting the size and budget of the federal government, a source familiar with the conversations around Musk tells CNN it seems unlikely that he would want a full-time government position, given what that would mean for the companies he owns, X, Tesla, and SpaceX. Wolf, we'll see what happens with Elon Musk.
Richest man in the world. All right, thanks very much, Brian Todd. Our political experts are here with me in the Situation Room, and Jeff Zeleny. The choice of Susie Wiles to become the White House Chief of Staff. She's the campaign manager. She did very well, very impressive. What does it signal?
It signals that the president-elect is ready to get started, and he knows his way around the job this time around considerably more than 4 years ago. 4 years ago when he was, or 8 years ago, excuse me, when he was being elected, he was coming from private business, from Trump Tower. Now he'll be coming into the Oval Office. He knows what he wants. He knows the people around him. And Susie Wiles is sort of a singular figure, I would say, in the former president's and president-elect's rise. I cannot think of a person who has had as much discipline. She has respect both inside and outside. She's someone who has not worked directly in Washington. She has a lot of long-standing Washington relationships at several firms in town, as Brian knows well, but she also has goodwill. But she will be the first female chief of staff. I think that is something that sends a message and a signal. But our Steve Contorno had some good reporting earlier. He said she had a couple demands, and one was this: the clown car can't come into the White House at will. And he agrees with her, a source close to the president-elect says. So that signifies that Susie Wiles is going to try and keep a level of discipline. And that she has some, her own explanation for that. She allows Trump to be Trump, but she also keeps some outsiders at bay. But the chief of staff is so important in setting the agenda and keeping things going. As we all know, it's just about 10 or 12 steps or so from the Oval Office. It has a corner office in the West Wing. It's important in terms of proximity and power.
It's very important indeed.
I think it's really important that she set out these parameters and said in advance, I will do this, but I have to be able to control access. And this was a problem that other chiefs of staff, most notably Kelly, complained about, because Trump had this open door policy and anybody could just wander in. And I think it shows a certain amount of discipline that she's going to try and enact inside the White House.
Brian Lanza, you worked with Susie Wiles. You know her. Give us a sense. What does this say to you?
Best in class. I mean, Donald Trump made a decision. He's going to choose best in class, and Susie Wiles is best in class. You said it right, continuity. You're going to have continuity in the campaign, and now you're going to have continuity in the administration. I think Trump made the best decision for himself, the best decision for a party and for the country. Susie knows how to execute, and that's the most important thing that President Trump wants. He doesn't want a lot of people talking. He wants people execute, and she knows how to execute as well. She knows that she has a tremendous amount of relationships here in Washington, D.C. She has the trust of the president. She has the trust of campaign staff. A lot of us would walk through fire for her, and we're excited she has it. And I do like to point out, she's a woman. My daughter can now have an example of a woman hitting a position of power like this, and I think that's a good thing for this country.
Let's talk about what's going on another key issue. Amisha Cross is with us as well. Trump said today that his proposal for mass deportation of undocumented immigrants will have, in his words, and I'm quoting him now, no price tag. What does that suggest to you about this massive effort that he's about to undertake?
That he doesn't know how the system works. I do think that Donald Trump is going to go outside of all things civil rights. He's going to go outside of all things justice to try to come through on a campaign promise. He wants to make sure that he is eradicating the undocumented population. He is not just speaking about new arrivals. He's talking also about people who've been in this country for the past 20, 30, 40 years. To do that, seismically to have to, have law enforcement that are correlating at the federal level as well as in the states and cities across this country. That does require a significant amount of money. We've seen what that price tag is. But because he recognizes the American public does not like big price tags on anything, he is, I think, lying flagrantly here about being able to do this without a cost associated.
All right, Jeff, as you know, Democrats will no longer control the new Senate once it comes in back to Washington. The House potentially remains in play right now, but do the Democrats really have the ability, assuming the House stays Republican, do the Democrats have any ability to affect real policy?
No, I mean, not if the House is in Republican control. It obviously depends what the margins are. I mean, the margins in the House, regardless, will be slim. So as long as the House stays unified, which is always an open question, of course, but Democrats will have limited policy control in both chambers. However, in the Senate, it still requires 60 votes on some things, and Republicans will not have 60 votes. But I think the finger pointing and the soul searching that is underway right now in the Democratic Party, it's not unique to Democrats. It happened in Republicans over the years. I'm thinking back to when Barack Obama was reelected in 2012, and Republicans were talking about we need to do an autopsy and figure out really how to rebuild the party. Parties get rebuilt on personalities and people we may not even be thinking about now. But for the short term, Democrats will have to make a decision if they're going to be part of the resistance, or some may find some need to cooperate on some things. I think Senator Schumer has already said we'll work in a bipartisan way on some things. But look, Democrats now, particularly if they don't control the House, which it looks like they won't, but we will see a lot of seats still must come in. They're in the wilderness for a minute.
Well, they're going to be in the wilderness for a while, and they need to go to the couch and sort of try and figure out what went wrong in this election. And because I was talking to a Democratic pollster who said, look, this is what he would call a rolling realignment in this country, and it is based on class. And the Democrats, the roles have been switched. The Republicans used to be the party of the elites. That's not the case anymore. The Democrats are known as the party of the elites, which is the reason they lost many Hispanic male voters, for example. And this is a huge issue for them. It wasn't a message problem or a messenger problem per se. They have a problem with voters in this country. And, they have to figure out where they want to work on, say, immigration reform, and where they don't want to work with the Republicans. I mean, they have to figure out where they stand on a bunch of stuff and get their act together, to be honest.
I agree with certain parts of that, but I don't think that this was as much of a messaging problem as some people are trying to make it out to be, as much as it is a policy not meeting where people are. Conversation, because if you're going to say that the Democrats were not the party of the working class or have abandoned them, which I've heard several working class people say, then I question how or why there is no connection between all of the union and workers' rights that were granted during the Biden-Harris administration. Why, when you have a president who is fighting for a living wage, fighting for a higher minimum wage, why, when you have somebody who is, as of today, there was an announcement about SNAP benefits being expanded for people who are on college campuses because a lot of them can't afford to eat. When I see things like that, and you're talking about individuals who are literally working tirelessly, the Democrats in the House, as well as President Biden and Kamala Harris, to ensure that individuals every day can feed their families, and they have the policies to prove it, and people who are beneficiaries of said policies are still arguing, even though the Trump administration previously and Trump have largely only done one thing. They have made tax cuts readily available to the rich and have increased the 1% class to stay there forever.
Listen, I would add that it's important to realize the role that inflation played in this.
Yeah.
Inflation played a huge role. It clouded everybody's judgment. It changed people the way they think. When a mother can't feed their child, they don't care about anything else. And so I think the Democratic Party, listen, the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton was very strong. The Democratic Party of Barack Obama was really strong. You can't say that about Joe Biden, but they focused on bread and butter issues. This coalition of Joe Biden got broader than it should have been, and they didn't know how to say no to certain constituencies.
When Donald Trump was in office, I do recall, it was the Thanksgiving before he left. The man was about to cut food stamps. So if we're talking about people who are taking food out of families' mouths that need to eat, he was leading that charge.
Yeah, and voters made a decision that the inflation that has bankrupted them, the inflation that has caused them to max out their credit cards, the inflation that's caused them to wipe their savings, sort of clouded everything.
Well, they didn't feel it, and there wasn't a good enough explanation about what happened, why.
And she didn't want to change anything.
What
Remember,
you're going to do, right?
No
there was
changes.
no separation.
There were certain things that I think were going to be stagnant regardless, particularly because coming out of the pandemic, we saw in every developed nation, leaders did not get reelected. So I think that holistically, there are people across the globe who were having those similar issues, and it was just really hard for any incumbent to stick there.
We begin tonight with Donald Trump's choice of his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, to be White House Chief of Staff, to do a job that 4 others did with varying degrees of success and frustration in the first Trump administration, in which CNN has learned she put conditions on taking, especially, one source tells us, concerning access to the president, or in the source's words, quote, the clown car can't come into the White House at will. Now, that same source adding, quote, and he agreed with her. Now, late today, in a statement announcing his decision, the president-elect said, quote, Susie is tough, smart, innovative, and is universally admired and respected. Susie will continue to work tirelessly to make America great again. She certainly had a job to do as a campaign manager for a candidate acknowledged to be difficult to manage and a president who frustrated several chiefs of staff the first time around. In thanking her and her fellow campaign official, Chris LaCivita, he highlighted her preference for avoiding the spotlight.
Let me also express my tremendous appreciation for Susie and Chris, the job you did. Susie, come here. Come here, Susie. Chris, come here, Chris. Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden.
Susie Wiles is the first of many people who will be chosen to serve in the second Trump administration that critics and supporters alike say will differ from the first, something that Donald Trump Jr. underscored today while saying he'd have a role in the selection process.
I'm going to be heavily involved on the transition. I want to make sure, now that we know who the real players are, the people who will actually deliver on the president's message, the people who don't think that they know better than the duly elected president of the United States.
Seems to be suggesting there'll be fewer independent thinkers, more loyalists than before, to carry out many promises that Trump made on the campaign trail.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. And if these companies don't make their products here, then they will be paying a stiff tariff when they send their products into the United States for the privilege of competing with our workers and our now protected companies. I will end the war in Ukraine. I will stop the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent World War III from happening. We will build a missile defense shield massively. We are going to build the greatest, the biggest missile defense shield.
We're going to protect kids in America. And we're going to get men out of women's sports in America.
Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., and he's going to work, and he's very strong on, you know, the pesticides and all of the different things.
We'll talk more tonight about how he plans to deliver on some of that and some of the repercussions if he does, especially from his deportation plans. First, though, more on the chief of staff appointment is CNN's Kristen Holmes. So what should people know about Susie Wiles?
Well, Susie Wiles is a Trump loyalist. She is one of the only people, Anderson, who stuck by his side after he left Washington in disgrace in 2021. She came to work for him, and she really stuck with him throughout the entire campaign. She served as de facto chief of staff after his first term. I was there on election night when he threw a fit because, this was in 2022, excuse me, because none of his candidates won. She was by his side then. She was by his side when he announced his candidacy shortly afterwards, and she has remained by his side. And I do think one of the important things to point out here is that quote that our colleague Steve Contorno got from someone who is an ally of Susie Wiles about the clown car, because that is something that she did and did well on the campaign. One of Susie's mottos when she talks to people close to her is that she can't control Donald Trump, and she understands that, but she can control everything around him. And that means access to the former president, now president-elect. And that is clearly something that she is going to do in the White House. They believe she did this well. It was keeping controversial figures away from Donald Trump. Obviously, she couldn't always do it, but it was trying to keep the chaos around him, who is a chaotic person, to a minimum. Now, this is really setting the tone for the entire administration because it is clear that she is someone who is taken seriously in Republican circles, particularly not just the MAGA side of things, but also the establishment side. People respect Susie Wiles. So this is really giving you an indication of where this is going to go. But first and foremost, Anderson, the thing that he cares about most is the fact that she was loyal to him.
Yeah. And who are some of the other people being talked about for high-profile jobs?
Yeah, there's quite a long list here. And again, I want to just make sure that we are being clear that there's going to be a lot of jockeying and these positions are going to roll out. We know some of them might come as early as this week, but these names are just some of the names that are being floated around. So for Secretary of State, one big one, Senator Marco Rubio. This has been floating around since he didn't get vice president. One thing to note, Don Jr., top advisor to Donald Trump, his father, lashed out at Marco Rubio, had some really nasty things to say when he was up for vice president. So we'll see how that plays out. Next, Attorney General, which is going to be one of the most important positions in Donald Trump's administration because Donald Trump wants to control the Justice Department. Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, is on that list. Mike Lee also on that list. I also want to add one name we don't have on this one, but it's John Ratcliffe, the former Director of National Intelligence. These are all names floating around. Elon Musk, he's up for some kind of government efficiency advisor. One thing to note about that, Donald Trump has joked about the fact that Elon Musk will not join the government. He doesn't want to get rid of any of his properties and any of his companies. He doesn't want to have to divest. We are told that this is likely going to be a workaround for Elon Musk in some kind of form of a committee or advisor role. Now, obviously, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we're very interested in that. A public health advisor, likely. We'll see how this all plays out. We know that RFK has been talking about how he wants to be potentially a secretary. Elise Stefanik for UN ambassador, that's one that I'm told she's already met with the heads of the transition team, and potentially Carolyn Levitt for press secretary. So this is moving fast as he named Susie Wiles today. We'll see what the next position he puts forward is.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks. Joining us now is Republican strategist Michael Singleton, CNN senior political commentator David Axelrod, journalist Gretchen Carlson, co-founder of Lift Our Voices, and Sabrina Rodriguez, national political reporter for the Washington Post. David, what do you make of the pick for chief of staff?
Look, I've said many times here during the course of this campaign that Donald Trump had, that the Trump campaign, they had a rational campaign and an irrational candidate, and she kept the campaign. She and Chris LaCivita kept the campaign on track, and they did, to a large degree, keep the clown car away. It's tougher in some ways in Washington, but
talk about that. I mean, the role of the chief of staff. You saw this obviously in the White House yourself under the Obama administration. There were in the former Trump administration, there were meetings with some of the.
Well, my guess is the one thing she's going to do is try to tightly control who goes into that Oval Office, and so that it's not people can't wander in and influence things without her knowledge, and that's going to be very important. I mean, if a chief of staff is empowered, can be really, really important in terms of the paper flow to the president, the people that the president sees, the decision tree. It can be very, very important. But I'll tell you this, chief of staff is very effective if the feeling around Washington is that chief of staff has the confidence of the president. And the fact that they've developed this close relationship, very important.
Sure, Michael, as a Republican, what do you think of this election?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, I've known of Susie Wiles for a very, very long time. And there are people who are not necessarily pro-Trump, but who are pro-Susie Wiles, because to them, this signals that the second coming of a Trump presidency is going to be very different. I mean, she's a trusted thinker. She has several decades of political experience, and she is someone who can prioritize and manage an operation. And David, you know this very well. That's going to be critical to David's point of controlling the flow of information and access to the former president. And having someone that he trusts who can sort of set up those guardrails will be critical to making sure that whatever types of judgment calls that are made, the best advisors are getting to him first and not anyone else. So I feel very confident about how this is shaping up so far.
Controlling, though, I mean, obviously Donald Trump is a unique figure in American politics, and given what we've seen, I mean, there's only so much one can do, I imagine.
Well, she obviously was doing something right because she's lasted a long time with him. And the idea that she was as disciplined with him as possible. I mean, I'm thinking about Laura Loomer, who, was with him during the 9/11 ceremonies, which was not a good look, and she probably wasn't happy about that. One thing I want to focus on, though, is that she's the first female chief of staff, which when I heard that today, I was like, wow, like that has never happened before. And the first thing I thought of actually after that was Mark Cuban owes her an apology for saying that Donald Trump was not surrounding himself with strong and smart women, because obviously she's been able to hang on to this role as a smart, strong woman with Donald Trump this long. I did also like the fact that she's going to keep the clown car out. I think Donald Trump is influenced by the last person he speaks to. And so that's really important. And I also thought about the fact that he brought in Corey Lewandowski this past summer, and I'm sure she didn't like that as well, because the talk at that time was maybe she's going to be on the way out and Corey Lewandowski is going to be higher up. So I think this is, well-deserved role for her.
Sabrina, you've followed the campaign obviously very well.
I think it's, for me, what's going to be interesting is seeing voter reactions to this. I think voters are less concerned about who exactly are the people that are going to be executing the policy. What they want to see is Donald Trump come into office on day one and do the things that he promised he was going to do. And a lot of these things are very lofty, ambitious plans. I mean, to execute the largest mass deportation effort in U.S. history is going to require a lot of coordination. And we know from, extensive reporting that behind the scenes, Trump allies have been planning for this for a while. So really, it's a question of watching him set up things in the next few months to be able to start implementing those things on day one.
In terms of selecting people, David, in a new administration, what is that process generally like? They have an advantage this time. They've done it before, so they know what mistakes they made the last time.
And obviously, a lot of people have been thinking about this, and they've had a process going on.
And loyalty seems to be very top of the list.
What happened the last time was they had a transition team, but there were, and Chris Christie was heading that transition team. He had differences, or Jared Kushner had differences with him, and took his transition report and threw it in the garbage. It was obviously it's a little more orderly, and now that she's empowered as the chief of staff, you'd think that she is going to play an even larger role in this. One thing we should mention, this will mean nothing to you, Anderson, but a lot of people will know this. Pat Summerall was her father, who was a great football player and kicker and broadcaster. So she's been around blocking and tackling all her life. That'll be useful.
Is it, Michael, you heard Donald Trump Jr. saying he's going to be very involved in sort of looking over the vetting process, the hiring process. Loyalty, clearly, they feel that they had people around then President Trump the last time, who were trying to kind of control his impulses. It seems like they don't want that same type of person around.
I think Susie Wiles is going to try to do a little bit of that. But I think, look, he's the president. You want individuals who are going to serve the president and serve him well. I was a part of the transition team in 2016 when Dr. Carson went to HUD. I'm very familiar with that process. And you have some good people. You don't have some not so good people, I suppose. I got a feeling this time, though, Anderson, looking at some of the names we've seen suggested for some of those key roles, this is going to be different. And you saw Sabrina talk about the mass immigration. How are you going to execute that? You need people that are going to be able to do it and do it well. What is that going to look like? Who are you choosing? I mean, there are a lot of complexities there. And I think if you're looking at this from Trump's perspective, you're looking at the first 60 to 90 days, not only immigration, but also the economy. What is that going to look like? What's going to be the focus there? So I think it's not necessarily about finding people who are uber loyal to the president, but loyal to trying to bring to fruition his ideas for the American people.
And I think that this time around, he's going to win the popular vote. And so I think that he feels like his mandate, he has more power in his mandate, thinking that a majority of the American citizens want him to do what he campaigned on. Whether or not that's true to the 46% other who didn't vote for him, that's another story. But I think that he's going to take control in a different way this time. He didn't understand Washington, D.C. when he came in 2016. So he brought in people who understood it better than he did, and he clashed with a lot of those people.
It's also, Sabrina, interesting to see what role, Vice President Vance will have in this administration. Obviously, when you're running, you see the vice president out campaigning a lot. as we saw when Biden took office, Vice President Harris sort of disappeared from public view for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's an open question at this point how involved Vance is going to be or what exactly Donald Trump will want to see him doing. I mean, if it's going to be having Vance out touting, what Trump is doing in those first days and really being a cheerleader for Donald Trump, I think we'll see some of J.D. Vance. If J.D. Vance goes off script and gives some different messaging around how things are going to be executed, I think he'll be in a more behind the scenes role and sort of what we expect from Vice President.
This is the thing, like you heard, the complexity in this job that he's appointing is very, very crucial. Now he has to make sure that he delivers on everything he has mentioned that he will do. He said he's going to secure the border, he's going to end the wars, he's going to make sure the groceries, the inflation, the gas prices go down. He's promised all of these things. So he has to deliver on this policies he's mentioned. He said electricity bills are going to go down 50% in the first year. And you know that man, he prouds himself in being a man of his word. So he wants to do what he said in the campaigns rally, and everything he said is for the good of the United States. So him having the House, the Senate, and the White House, it's just going to be easier to get done. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. And this is the second time. He's coming back the second time. This is like the second coming of the dawn. So he has learned his lessons from 2017 to 2021. And also him not being the president from 2021 to 2024. He has learned a lot from the outside. And I believe that you have to learn a lot from the outside. You can't really learn too much from the inside. You have to go out there, get another perspective and say, maybe that's what I missed. So now he has learned a lot. And this is why I project American greatness begins now. All right. So Putin has congratulated the president-elect. Tell you, man, lay down your arms, bro. Lay down your arms. It's over. Okay? Peace. That's what we want. Tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Let's see what Putin is talking about.
Tonight, President-elect Trump revealing he has not spoken with Vladimir Putin since his victory, as he receives a flood of calls from world leaders. The Russian president, though, publicly praising Trump for his bravery during the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Putin speaking today saying, quote, he behaved, in my opinion, in a very correct way, courageously, like a real man. Fred Pleitgen is out front.
After launching a massive attack aimed at the heart of Kyiv, Russian leader Vladimir Putin praising President-elect Donald Trump. I would like to take this opportunity to offer my congratulations on his election as President of the United States, Putin says. So you're willing to talk to Trump, the moderator asks. Yes, we're ready, Putin says. Indeed, President-elect Trump seems willing to talk to Putin as well. Legendary journalist Bob Woodward writing in a recent book that the two men have had a number of phone calls, up to 7, since Trump left office. Trump reportedly gifting Putin COVID tests in the early days of the pandemic when those tests were scarce. And Trump himself has often praised his relations with the Russian president, even siding with Vladimir Putin over the U.S.'s own intelligence services after Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
As Russia continues its full-on invasion of Ukraine, gaining ground especially on the Eastern Front, the president-elect still saying he'd be able to end the war fast.
They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done in 24 hours. If we had a real president, the president that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine.
But the Ukrainians fear Trump might cut off military aid to Ukraine altogether, forcing the country into a de facto surrender and loss of territory.
Every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he walks away with $100 billion. I think he's the greatest salesman on earth. But we're stuck in that war unless I'm president.
And when pressed to answer whether he even wants Ukraine to win the war, Trump simply won't say.
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives.
And you know, Aaron, Russian leader Vladimir Putin also saying that if Donald Trump were to call him and say, hey, Vladimir, let's meet up, he certainly wouldn't be averse to doing that. In general, the Russians are saying that they are looking for countries to call them and reestablish relations. Aaron?
All right, Fred, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Fareed Zakaria, host of Fareed Zakaria GPS. So Fareed, Trump wins, Putin comes out and hails a, quote, completely new world order. Is it?
Well, what Putin was talking about there was a completely new world order in which American power is declining, in which Western power is declining, and as he sees it, Russia and China and countries like Iran are ascendant. So it's a very particular version of a new world order, and I would find it very difficult to imagine that any American president would sign on to that new world order.
So I guess in that context, Fareed, how do you see the relationship between Trump and Putin? Right, where Trump has so often, even recently, touted his relationship, his friendship, his with Vladimir Putin.
So I think that Trump often talks about it exactly as you say, Aaron, and he talks about the war and how he wants to end it, which all sounds great, and of course we would all like to see the war end. But what I think is often missing in the way Trump talks about it is Vladimir Putin has launched the most blatant act of aggression in Europe since World War II. He has attempted a kind of reconquest of an empire of a kind that hasn't taken place in 70 years. He's trying to essentially wipe Ukraine off the map. He's engaged in the kind of cross-border aggression that the United States said after World War II would not be legitimized, would not be tolerated. And every president since then has maintained that standard. And there have been actually almost no cases of acquisition of territory by conquest that was legitimized by the international community. So the question is, does President-elect Trump see that that is the light in which you have to look at Vladimir Putin? Yes, he's a strong leader. He's a powerful interlocutor. I would argue an adversary, but he's not your pal. He's not somebody with whom you're just schmoozing. It's somebody who has done something that is about to destroy the international system, and you have to solve the problem, stand up to him. It doesn't mean that you can't make concessions to him, but that's the kind of broader political context, perhaps even moral context, in which you have to approach Putin.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that would, of course, be an incredible shift were that to occur. Now, former President Obama, spoke out about the election, and he said, Fareed, America has been through a lot over the past few years, from a historic pandemic and price hikes resulting from the pandemic to rapid change, and the feeling a lot of folks have that no matter how hard they work, treading water is the best they can do. Those conditions have created headwinds for Democratic incumbents around the world, and last night showed that America is not immune. Obviously, you've seen this in far-right governments that have been elected across Europe. They're ascendant right: Germany, Austria, France, Portugal, Belgium, you name it. I remember having a meeting at the White House 18 months ago, and they were pulling out all these polls when they were talking about Biden's reelection chances, showing the affinity that the public has across Europe. And at that time, it was all but one country, they said, for a strongman, autocratic type of leader. Is it really happening everywhere?
Well, it is happening everywhere, but it's not always an affinity for a strongman autocratic leader. It is just a certain people are fed up. They feel they feel like the world is in turmoil. Inflation got out of control, and so they punished incumbents. The best example is, we're closest in a sense politically to Great Britain, and the Tory party, the Conservative Party, went from probably the largest majority they had had in 75 years to the smallest minority they had in 75 years in one election. That seems almost impossible to imagine. In Japan, the LDP, which has ruled Japan essentially uninterruptedly since the late 1940s, has just lost. So there's a lot of anti-incumbency. But, I think it's also fair to say that the Democrats played this, in my opinion, not as well as they could have, and Trump played it very well.
You're being, of course, diplomatic in that. I mean, I don't know if you heard Van Jones, Andrew Yang earlier talking about the issue. Can I just ask you, though, to that point, Fareed, do you think that this was inevitable, that Trump was going to win as an inevitable thing against any Democrat? Or do you think that the candidate, specifically who it was, Kamala Harris, or her position as being the vice president of the incumbent, do you think that drove it more?
I think it's not Kamala Harris as a person or as a candidate. I think being the vice president hurt because you are tarred with being part of the government. And if people are looking for change, it would have been easier for people to look for change if it was whomever, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, you could imagine many people. But I will say there were decisions that were made that, that the Democrats have made that they have to live with. Not cracking down early on immigration. It was absolutely clear the immigration system was collapsing. The asylum system was broken. And you could see that around the world, right-wing populism was being fed by immigration. Yeah. And there were lots of people, if I may point out, I myself kept pointing out that you've got to take a much harder line on immigration. That is the number one issue that the public thinks is out of control. So I think that played a large part. I also think the Democrats have gotten trapped in a kind of identity politics bubble where they were not able to see categories outside of it. So they were not able to appeal to working class Hispanics as anything other than Hispanics. And those people began to move toward Trump because they're also socially conservative. Maybe they like his kind of machismo. Whatever it is, the identity politics trap has placed Democrats in a very strange position of, reversing Martin Luther King's line. They're judging people by the color of their skin, not the content of their character.
Yeah. All right. Well, Fareed.
One thing is for sure, are we glad that the 47th is the Don, the legendary, the 45th, now the 47th, Donald Trump? The economy is already looking like it's going to bounce all the way to the moon, just like BTC has, just like the stock market has, and he's not even in office yet. One thing I want to see is the peace around the world. This is something I want to see. Double tap your screen to give this stream a like. If you think I should get a like, please like the live stream and subscribe to the channel. All right, one thing I want to do is go back in time, and I want us to close with the inauguration speech of the 45th, just to get that feeling of what we would get next year. Okay, let's get it. This is emotional right here.
What a great honor to be able to introduce for the Chief Justice Roberts, President Carter, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, fellow Americans, and people of the world, thank you. We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Together, we will determine the course of America and the world for many, many years to come. We will face challenges. We will confront hardships, but we will get the job done. Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. And we are grateful to President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama for their gracious aid throughout this transition. They have been magnificent. Thank you. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but the jobs left and the factories closed. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. That all changes starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. It belongs to everyone gathered here today and everyone watching all across America. This is your day. This is your celebration. And this, the United States of America, is your country. What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Everyone is listening to you now. You came by the tens of millions to become part of a historic movement, the likes of which the world has never seen before. At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens. Americans want great schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, and good jobs for themselves. These are just and reasonable demands of righteous people and a righteous public. But for too many of our citizens, a different reality exists. Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge. And the crime, and the gangs, and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. We are one nation, and their pain is our pain. Their dreams are our dreams, and their success will be our success. We share one heart, one home, and one glorious destiny. The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans. For many decades, we've enriched foreign industry at the expense of American industry, subsidized the armies of other countries while allowing for the very sad depletion of our military. We've defended other nations' borders while refusing to defend our own. And spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas while America's infrastructure has fallen into disrepair and decay. We've made other countries rich while the wealth, strength, and confidence of our country has dissipated over the horizon. One by one, the factories shuttered and left our shores, with not even a thought about the millions and millions of American workers that were left behind. The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their homes and then redistributed all across the world. But that is the past, and now we are looking only to the future. We assembled here today are issuing a new decree to be heard in every city, in every foreign capital, and in every hall of power. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs. Protection will lead to great prosperity and strength. I will fight for you with every breath in my body, and I will never, ever let you down. America will start winning again, winning like never before. We will bring back our jobs. We will bring back our borders. We will bring back our wealth. And we will bring back our dreams. We will build new roads and highways and bridges and airports and tunnels and railways all across our wonderful nation. We will get our people off of welfare and back to work, rebuilding our country with American hands and American labor. We will follow two simple rules: buy American and hire American. We will seek friendship and goodwill with the nations of the world, but we do so with the understanding that it is the right of all nations to put their own interests first. We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine for everyone to follow. We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones, and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. At the bedrock of our politics will be a total allegiance to the United States of America. And through our loyalty to our country, we will rediscover our loyalty to each other. When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice. The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. When America is united, America is totally unstoppable. There should be no fear. We are protected, and we will always be protected. We will be protected by the great men and women of our military and law enforcement. And most importantly, we will be protected by God. Finally, we must think big and dream even bigger. In America, we understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving. We will no longer accept politicians who are all talk and no action, constantly complaining but never doing anything about it. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. Do not allow anyone to tell you that it cannot be done. No challenge can match the heart and fight and spirit of America. We will not fail. Our country will thrive and prosper again. We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. A new national pride will stir our souls, lift our sights, and heal our divisions. It's time to remember that old wisdom our soldiers will never forget, that whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots. We all enjoy the same glorious freedoms, and we all salute the same great American flag. And whether a child is born in the urban sprawl of Detroit or the windswept plains of Nebraska, they look up at the same night sky, they fill their heart with the same dreams, and they are infused with the breath of life by the same almighty Creator. So to all Americans in every city, near and far, small and large, from mountain to mountain, from ocean to ocean, hear these words: you will never be ignored again. Your voice, your hopes, and your dreams will define our American destiny. And your courage and goodness and love will forever guide us along the way. Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. God bless America.
You've heard from the 45th, now the 47th. This was 2016 inauguration speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you for tuning into the live stream. It is your boy Genesis. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Double tap your screen if you want to give this stream a like, and subscribe to the channel. Consider subscribing to the channel, okay? It is your boy Genesis one more time. The title of this stream is American Greatness. Thank you to the veterans. Thank you to the moderators in the chat. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. God bless you. God is great. I am signing out. I love you guys, man. God bless you.